All right. Hello, Motive family. Today I want to help you understand 6 skills of powerful communication. And why I want you to understand these is because every day we are influenced by people whose problems, struggles, resentments, and experience vary from honestly all ends of the spectrum. And in order for people to choose to stay connected to you, when they come to you with these struggles, depends largely on how you listen. Whether these people are you, your children, employees, spouses, friends, even complete strangers, or obviously the in-laws, they and we all want to be heard. We want to be understood, empathized with, and ultimately just belong. I've found most of us really struggle to consistently to experience these important outcomes with people because we are too busy giving or preparing advice, flat out fixing the problem, or getting ready, or we're already spitting out our defensiveness towards them. In other words, one of the biggest temptations we all have when someone isn't listening to us is to not listen back. Those who choose differently, however, to listen when even being attacked, ultimately win the war of staying powerfully connected to those in your sphere of influence. So, if you have desires to learn how to calm a difficult situation, have deeper and more vulnerable conversations, create more connections, and honestly really be able to understand people at far deeper and more clear levels, then take these steps seriously and honestly master them. When I say master, I honestly mean to memorize and practice and practice and practice over and over and over again. So before I get into these steps, I want to tell you a little bit of my experience. So as a young man, teenage time, a compliment and also almost a criticism I got a lot was how blunt I was as a person. My mom told me that, my neighbors told me that, girls told me that, and I often took it as a very negative trait. And then I went on a mission trip to Berlin, Germany, which was amazing. And Germany only instilled within me more of permission to just be blunt. The German people are great people, but they are extremely blunt, and they will tell you exactly what they mean. And they don't mean offense, but they will tell you exactly what they want you to hear. And so it gave me permission to actually just, again, speak my mind more and more. And I do think all of this was preparing me to be a therapist. However, along my path, I have offended many people. I mean, I'm talking burning bridges, just said things that just were almost flippant, impulsive too, and honestly needed a bit of a filter. And as I've gone through my life, I've always tried to find a solution for how can I still maintain this trait that I have of being blunt, but also be able to be sensitive and to be kind, to be able to understand people. And that's what these steps are about. I know I gave a bit of a preface about them, but these steps really are about understanding people. And in my daily experience with parents, with bosses, with employees, with clients that are, teenagers and 20-year-olds, one thing that we all really do struggle with as a population is listening. And I heard it once said, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And we often are the opposite. I would say we often speak twice as much as we really listen. Whereas if we would listen twice as often as we speak, we actually, I think, would all be much closer together as people. So these steps are going to help you to do that. They're going to help you to actually have deeper empathy, to take a situation and a conversation that what I call is kind of on a superficial level, and we're going to be able to funnel it down into the deeper stuff that's actually happening. So as a parent, you can imagine how important this would be. If your son come to you and he said, I hate you, a lot of times as parents we would say, don't you dare talk to me that way, show respect, and maybe a slew of other things. But what's actually happening is that child, when he's saying I hate you, there's actually something else much deeper going on. And it's often, for example, it could be that kid is very lonely. Maybe something happened at school that this really was difficult, and his first statement to you when you say something to him was, I hate you, and he's actually trying to just test the grounds to see if you're going to listen to him or her. again, this also takes place when it comes to if you work with people and most of you probably work with people in your job, and those interactions go back and forth every day, and how you handle those interactions is really important. And if somebody says something to you about maybe something they're frustrated with, or maybe if it's even of a slight kind of passive slant at you, these skills are going to be able to help you to, instead of getting defensive, instead of creating a fight and creating contention, to be able to turn to them and say, look, can I talk about this? Can we talk about what you just said? Without creating an enemy. So let's get into this. So step number one, this step to me is so important. And I want to tell you as well that these steps don't necessarily have to be used in a chronological order or any kind of order. They just need to be mastered and then used as you see them appropriate to be needed. However, when talking to somebody, I often will use this step in the very first way. And this step is called the permission step. Okay, so let me say that one more time. This is the permission step. The permission step is an idea where I'm respecting the person's free will and agency who I'm talking to. So I get teenagers in my office all the time. I have parents in my office all the time. And then I also do consulting on the side, and I talk to businesses and I talk to people that I don't really know well. And so before I just jump into their life, I go to step one and say, hey, can I ask you a question? It's that simple. That simple phrase has helped me in more situations than I can count. The statement, the question in and of itself is very easy, but the message underneath that question is very powerful. It shows respect. It shows that I'm respecting their time as well. If they're in a situation that they don't have time, it shows that I'm open to talking later if they were maybe in a bad mood or just weren't ready to talk. But it's also a healthy commitment step where when you ask somebody if you can talk to them, hey, can I ask you a question? When they answer, yeah, we can, they're actually committing themselves to being a better listener as well. Okay, so that's step number one. And use it as you need to. Again, it's not going to be used all the time. In fact, it's often used in the middle of a conversation when maybe somebody says something to you that your brain is kind of fixated on, and you need to maybe ask more. And that's a good way to kind of stop them and say, hey, can I ask you a question about that? Really quickly, and take a step back to where they were. So that's step one, the permission step. Respects agency, respects the person. Step number two, okay, this step is a bit more difficult, but is, I would say, as difficult as it is, equals to how powerful that it is. This is called the disarming step, okay? So you got to think about, this is a powerful step used when anybody says something to you that you have a hard time agreeing with, whether it's a criticism, whether it's a statement from someone who they kind of just say it out of the blue, they say something that hits you in a way that you don't know how to respond. So again, if I go back to my example of maybe it's a teenage son or daughter, and they said, I hate you, Mom, you never listen to me, I just can't stand how much you try to control me, you guys have all these rules, I can't even be my own person, you know the spiel. And the first inclination, like I said, is for that parent to say, don't you dare say that, you don't hate me, maybe defend yourself. But disarming is the idea of actually trying to agree with or find truth in something that person is saying. This is hard. This is really difficult, because when a kid tells you they hate them, or when they tell you that you never listen to them, you're going to want to naturally disagree with them. So in that moment, disarming them would actually be the principle of saying, you're right. It's obvious right now that you really do hate me, and that's it. Okay, it's very simple to do almost. Like, how should I say it? Saying you're right is very simple in its principle, but actually dealing with your own anxiety and agreeing with what they're saying can be very difficult. Okay, so let me talk about disarming a little bit longer, because this one it's a difficult one to understand. There's a principle I believe in that says when you defend someone's criticism, you are actually validating that what they criticized you with is correct. So again, if one of my clients says, Shaden, you never listen to me. And I said, yes, I do. I listen to you every session. What I just did is I defended myself and therefore actually told them how right they are. Okay, can you see that? How much I just told them that I don't listen to them? I literally told them that I do listen to them when they told me I didn't, which is not listening to them. Okay, so this concept comes deep from within a concept, another concept, which is they have their truth and I have mine. And as soon as they tell me their truth, and if I disagree with that truth, and then I try to tell them that what their truth is needs to be what my truth is, it's over. You just lost that person, you lost the connection, you created resentment very likely, and you created a fight. Whether that fight's going to be verbal or just internal for that person, it's going to happen. So disarming it's one of the more difficult steps for anybody to master, because we all have our hot buttons and we all have things that people can say to us, and we all have things that we believe in. We have our biases, we have our life experiences. And if you hate Donald Trump and somebody said to you, I love Donald Trump, you're going to have a bias on that, on how you're going, how you could actually say, yeah, tell me more about that. And how would you actually be able to disarm that if they kept talking about Trump over and over and over again, and you were needing to kind of like not get defensive? It could be kind of difficult for you. Kind of a bad example, but we'll go there. So disarming, again, is in its very simple form, is two words: you're right. And that, again, that does not mean, I can hear a lot of you, even though I'm talking to a camera, it doesn't mean you agree with everything they say. It just means that you have listened to them enough that you can agree with something that they're saying, or find their truth in what they are saying, even if you don't agree. And that validates the other side of the principle, that is, when you accept what people are saying, especially a criticism, and can agree with it, you're actually setting up that person to take back what they said. So if this client of mine again said, Shaden, you never listened to me, and instead of defending myself, which would validate what she said, and I said, yeah, you know what, you're right. There's times that I don't listen to you. In fact, today's been kind of a hard day for me. I've kind of been distracted, and I'm betting that's influenced you pretty hard. And thinking, golly, you're at therapy, and your therapist is kind of looking out the window or not really paying attention. In that very moment, can you imagine if I responded that way, what I would have been influencing her to do, which would have been to be more gracious with me, be more forgiving with me. And it's very likely, if that person had integrity and wanted to be more connected, she might even say, well, actually, you do listen to me. It's not that you never listen to me. It's just that I think today's been kind of hard, and I don't know that you've really understood me. And after she goes there, now we're starting to do that funnel that I kind of was showing with my hands earlier, that she said this open blanket statement of, you never listened to me. I agreed with it in partiality, the way that I wanted to. And then she started to fix what she said in saying, it's just kind of today that I feel that way. And then that's going to invite me to say, oh, well, tell me more. What's that been like for you? Which is actually another step that we're going to get into. So if you don't understand this step after I've explained it on this video, go back and review it, and re-listen to it, and if there's more confusion, then give us some feedback, because I want to know. But because this step is a bit more difficult to really comprehend. However, you just got to practice, and that's where I would challenge you to do individually with each one of these steps, is to practice them. And so this one, I would actually ask you to think about, what's something that somebody has said to you that you've just gone defensive so quickly. What are those things people say, whether it's a boss, it's a spouse, a friend, what have you, that creates pretty quick defensiveness in you? And I want you to now think about, what is it you could say differently? How could you, instead of just defending yourself, which is only validating to them that they're right, what could you do to kind of disarm that? and actually have the goal of connecting with that person rather than just fighting. Okay, so go ahead and try that. All right, so now we're going to get into step 3. Okay, so step 3, we have, this is our empathy step. Okay, so this has 2 parts to it. This entire process to me is very empathic in and of itself. Whenever we're asking permission, if we're disarming people, all of that to me is a process of empathy. In other words, really understanding them. However, this step is the most empathic, I would say, step of all. So we're just going to call it empathy. And it has, the 2 parts are emotion empathy and thinking empathy or thought empathy. So again, let's start with emotion empathy. So emotion empathy is when someone is speaking to you, you are listening for 2 things. You are listening for the emotions that they are saying specifically, that they're saying in their language, that they're saying in the very story or in the context of what they're talking about. And number 2, you're listening for emotions that are kind of under the surface, things that you, if you put yourself in their shoes, you would very likely feel. And if you will do that over and over, you'll start to find how much more you're forgetting about yourself and actually being able to listen to their experience, which will then ignite within you the gift that all of us have, which is called compassion. When we start to see other people's emotions and fears, our compassion actually naturally comes out. And so to me, empathy is the skill base to unleash compassion. And I don't know about you, but compassion is a beautiful thing, and our world needs more of it. And so I hope that you'll take this seriously. Now, it's one thing to listen for the emotions, both that are being said and that are underneath the surface, but it's another thing to then say them back. And that's what this step really is. I've listened to you, I'm listening for the emotions, and then I would say back to you, hey, yeah, John, it sounds like you're feeling pretty anxious. You said just barely how anxious you are and how worried you are, and but also you said that you're pretty, sad. But I'm wondering too if you're not just angry as well. I think I'd be pretty angry as well. Is that true? Do you think there's also some anger, and or am I correct about that? And that's an important step as well. Is this step is a really neat one because you have to take a risk. It is risky in that you have to put yourself out there and attempt to say some emotions that you think they might be feeling. But please trust that empathy is a win-win situation. In other words, trying empathy is better than giving advice any day of the week. And even failing at empathy, at least is a message to the person that you're trying to listen. Whereas just giving advice or trying to fix the problem or defending yourself is nothing. It just disconnects you. So again, this step, it doesn't have to be done in order. It's actually something that I'm constantly doing is when I'm listening to somebody, trying to listen to what they are feeling and then saying it back to them. And sometimes I have to put my hand up actually. Sometimes I have to say, hey, hold on for just a second. I just want to make sure that I'm kind of getting what you're feeling here. Because your face, your face looks really angry, but you also said that you're pretty sad. Is that true? And I like to ask that question of asking them, am I understanding your emotions correctly? And the neat part is we as humans, we will fix people. We will fix if what they are saying isn't true. If what I'm saying to you isn't true, we'll fix it. And we'll say, no, it's not that I'm angry. I'm just I guess I'm just frustrated or I'm disappointed. Oh, okay. And when they fix it, now all of a sudden you're deepening this level, getting to this core issue that's going on. Which again, I know I kind of explained it before, but when we're talking with people, when we're trying to connect with people, when we're trying to help people, which is what, that we all want, everybody says it in one way or another, we want to help people. We can't help this superficial stuff. We got to get to the core, which is what motive is all about, is getting into these deeper motives about what is really there. And when we find that, that's when we're going to be able to help. And there's no greater step and there's no greater pathway to finding the core than through emotion. Emotion it's a God-given gift for all of us. It's the universal language of the world, of every human being that's there. Sadness is sadness all over the world. Anxiety is anxiety all over the world. It doesn't matter who you are. So that's empathy, step one. Again, that's emotion empathy or emotional empathy. Number two is this thought empathy. This is a very simple one, and I think as a people, this is probably the one most people are best at, and that is simply listening to what is being said, and then it's almost like the person read a page of a book out of their life to you or their experience, and you're just kind of turning that page back and summarizing it back to them, making sure that you have understood the key points of what they were saying. This is a really important step, especially if somebody's, pretty angry. Let's just say your son or daughter, employee, doesn't matter. They're coming at you and they're kind of spouting off all this energetic like fuel and content of what they want to get out, this story, and they keep going on and on and on. It's really important that you use that hand again and and very politely use that permission step if you need to and say, hey, hold on, I need to ask you a question. And take it back to, I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. So you're telling me that even though that you gotta be in this class, you're really proud of yourself. I'm kind of and the teacher had a hard time teaching you, and you felt like you had a hard time focusing. That's kind of what's gotten you to this point for you. Is that what you said? So this process of simply unfolding back what they said is very simple, but it takes you have to listen, and if you have your own agenda where you're trying to you're trying to instill your truth, or you can't stop thinking about what you want to say, you're not going to be able to hear it, and that's what most people struggle with. Okay, so this step is called thought empathy, and the key ingredient in thought empathy is to be able to fully understand the story that they have, and then spit it back to them in a way that's healthy. Maybe I shouldn't use the word spit, but you're summarizing it back healthily to them so that they know that they're being understood. So maybe what you could do now actually is think about a recent conversation you had that somebody has told you anything. Maybe it's even just a simple conversation, nothing really heated, but I want you to think about, how well did you listen? Did you disagree with them very quickly in your mind? Did you not really take time to really understand where they were coming from, and were you really anxious to tell them where you're coming from? And if you were, that's very normal, but it's also a weakness. It's a weakness when it comes to actually having the connection, the maneuverability, the vulnerability, and the influence that you likely want to have as a parent, as a leader of anything, as a teenager with your friends. I don't care who you are. If we want to influence people in any way, shape, or form, we better be better listeners. And these two steps, even by themselves, are amazing and have changed my life, let alone let's add in all the others. So step number 4. So let's review real quick. We've done step 1, which is the permission step. Step 2 is disarming. Step 3, we have empathy, which is with two different types. We have emotion empathy and thought empathy. And then skill 4, or step 4, would be we have the questions of curiosity. And this step is kind of like the permission step, but it's, I would say, much more detailed. So one thing I've noticed, I get parents in my office all the time who they tell me my kid never opens up to me. He's just super quiet, he never opens up. And I say to them all the time, actually, they might be opening up and you just don't know it. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, tell me something that they said to you lately. And they'll say, well, like just the other day, he was trying to do his homework and he's like, I just hate my homework. And we asked him, well, why do you hate the homework? He's like, I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know, I don't care. And they say, see, like even in that situation, it just doesn't open up. And I said, wait a minute here, stop for just a second. He actually did. And the way he opened up was he told you he hates homework. And that was his gate kind of creaking open. And if you would use these steps and have more of a curiosity about why he said that, it's very likely you could get him to kind of open up more. And they'll say, well, what do you mean? I'd say, for example, let's go through some of these skills a little. And I hate homework. And how could you disarm that? Oh, you could say, yeah, it sounds like you really do. It sounds like it's pretty frustrating for you. You're telling me that you've hated homework your whole life. Every time you go to do it, it's just confusing. There's some thought empathy. There's some emotion empathy. I've already disarmed. And I just want to ask you a question. There's step number, one. Like, what is it that do you hate homework, so to speak, or is it possible like homework makes you feel like stupid or just like super overwhelmed, like, and you just kind of say you hate homework, but maybe is it the way you feel? And a lot of times, if parents if they can act and they can ask these questions calmly, or if in this situation, if I could ask it really calmly, it's likely this kid might start to open up and maybe say something like, no, yeah, you're right. Like, I do hate homework, but really it does. It makes me feel dumb. Like, it makes me feel like, yeah, I hate it. Every time I go to do math, it's like, here we go again. And now all of a sudden, he's giving you all of this stuff that you can start to listen to more and more and more and ask more questions about. So questions of curiosity or curious questions is a mindset to me. As a parent, as a friend, as a boss, as an employee, as anybody, just as a human being, are you curious about people's puzzle? When they talk to you, when they open up to you even a little bit, if you're willing to go beyond just being defensive or giving them advice or telling them what to do, and actually start asking open-ended questions to them that would help you to start putting together all of these puzzle pieces, you would find that what most of us open up with when we start to talk really has not a lot to do with what's really happening. And that the better questions that we ask, the more ground we make and the deeper we start to dig this funnel, again, getting down to this core. So this step, to me, I'm not going to say any of them are the most important. However, this one if this was missed, I just don't see how you can get to the core. Unless that kid or that person is just so open, they just like tell you everything. But that's the point. Like, these skills are used for when somebody doesn't do that. And so if you can't have curiosity about somebody's, what I always say, curiosity about their hell, then don't act like you care. And I know that kind of seems blunt, but if you really care about somebody, are you willing to go to their hell, to their darkness, to the place that maybe is actually about you? And have you given them that safe environment for them to say it? This is especially important when it comes to teenagers to parents, or an employee to a boss. Any type of hierarchy. If you are that person that would be considered almost in greater authority than them, this is your responsibility. And if you take it seriously and you understand that it's up to you to create a safe environment for them to be able to speak, doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say, but at least they have their explanation out there. And that's a step, that's a principle within, I guess, that I could teach within this step, which is explanation is not justification. Let me say that again. Explanation is not justification. And this is kind of my Adolf Hitler principle, that if he were here, if I had a recording right now of a video of me and Adolf Hitler, wouldn't you guys want to know his story? Wouldn't it be cool for a therapist to be able to just talk and ask Adolf Hitler why? What you experienced? What is his story? It doesn't justify anything he did, but does it explain it? Yeah. And crazy enough, explanation is that first step in forgiveness, actually. And many people come to me wanting to know how they can forgive someone. Well, guess what? Forgiveness needs a story. And that doesn't mean we need to have every bit of a story, but in order to have forgiveness with people, we have to ignite compassion. And like I told you, nothing invites compassion more than hearing someone's story with their emotions included. And so if you're not willing to ask the questions to get their story, then I would challenge whether you really care or not. And so this skill needs to be practiced. Yes or no questions, especially with a teenager, don't really work very well. But if you're asking more open-ended questions, then now you're going to start getting some ground. And so again, I am not going to give you all a bunch of like questions that you can ask because they just involve the situation. They're relative to what the story is about. They're relative to the emotions that they're feeling. You know, if they're feeling sad, you could simply say, can you tell me more about this sadness? Like what's happened that you're so sad? See how that's open-ended? And once they've given an emotion, a lot of times it's much easier for them to give the story behind it and then be willing to listen. All right, so that's step 4. And I really challenge you on every one of these. Practice them individually. If you try to take on all 6 of these at once, it's going to get a little hard and you might end up being really, really funky with somebody. But if you'll choose one a day to just try to focus on in all of your interactions, you'll find that you'll very quickly be able to start developing these. So step 5, okay, I say step 5 again, skill 5, technique 5. This one, this is a really important one. This is the self-expression step. I'm not a big proponent of I statements. To me, those seem too rigid and too mechanical. Does that mean if we say I feel that we're being mechanical? No, those 2 words go together more often than not in a day than almost any other thing. However, self-expression is the idea that this one needs to come a little bit later, but self-expression in a conversation with someone has to be able to still have a rule to it. And the rule is that even though I'm expressing myself, I am still keeping the focus on you. Let me say it again. Even though I might be expressing myself, the focus is still on you. And so let's just say, you know, if my wife came to me and said, I've been feeling really lonely lately. I don't feel very connected to you. And I've listened to her and I've asked questions and we've dug even deeper. This is where I could say to her, my wife's name's Shelly. I could say, Shelly, yeah, I just got to be honest with you. I feel kind of defensive when you're saying that. I'm trying not to be, but I also just feel kind of sad. I feel sad because I know that I probably have been really busy with stuff and I haven't maybe paid attention to it the best that I could. And a lot of times I like to follow that up with just another question to take it back to them and just say, is that kind of how it's been for you? Like I just really haven't been spending as much time as I probably ought to and could. And it's kind of left you pretty lonely. Yeah, and then maybe she responds, yeah, that's exactly it. So self-expression, again, if I define it simply, it's being able to express how what they're saying to you is impacting you. And you don't say it with criticism, you don't say it with guilting them, you say it more just matter of fact, like that this is what you're telling me, it's kind of hard to hear. And that leads perfectly into our last skill and our last step, which is step 6. And again, I say last because of the order that I wrote them in, but by all means, this doesn't need to be used in that order. And this is the building step. Building, I use the word building as in simply telling somebody and telling the person thank you, or giving them a compliment, telling them you're proud of them in a non-patronizing way for what they said to you. I get teenagers in my office all the time that reveal things to me that they haven't revealed to their parents, they haven't revealed to anybody. And when I look at them in the eyes and I say, I just want to tell you how honored it is for me, how honored I am to have heard that, and how proud I am of you for having the courage to have said that. It's just remarkable. And it's amazing, and I thank the world of you for being courageous enough to say that. That's a huge step for them. And when anybody is being vulnerable with us, and we're actually listening well, it just goes so far to be able to tell them what you think of them in a good way, to give them a compliment, to thank them for saying it, to build them up in any way that you can. Obviously, this step is a simple step in and of itself of building relationships. The thing is, you can't fake it. And you can't fake any of these. I'm teaching you these things that you can internalize them up here and you can study them like a book. But honestly, right, I kind of said this earlier, if your heart's not in it, if you don't truly want to listen, it'll come out. It'll show. And that's your work to do. And if you really struggle with that, it's probably good to maybe even have a session or two to kind of clear up what's going on for you. there's some resentment, some forgiveness you probably need to deal with, or there's some insecurities that maybe as a parent, you keep thinking it's your kid's fault, when in all reality, you keep getting your buttons pushed and triggered because you haven't really dealt with something that you're kind of ashamed of, or that's just an insecurity for you. That's not on them. That's on you. It's on them to be manipulative and to push those buttons, but it's on you that you can't deal with it. Same thing as a boss. I love working with people in authority, because I think it's something that is abused the most. And so when people can start harnessing authority in a charitable way, in a loving way, for me, in a way that like Christ would harness, that he harnesses his authority, it's beautiful. And these 6 skills, and I say skills hesitantly, they are skills, but they're principles. They apply to everything really in people. When you harness them, you'll realize how much more people become important to you, and you'll also start respecting your story more. You'll start being more empathic towards yourself. You'll start being more warm and understanding about you, because of that old principle, right, of the law of attraction, and also just that when you give empathy, when you give understanding, when you give listening, it comes back to you. And again, to kind of finish this off from where we began, we all want to be understood. We all want to be heard. We all want to belong. Are you willing to do that to others? Are you willing to do it to strangers? Are you willing to do it to with your children? Are you willing to listen to your employees? Are you willing to listen to your spouse? Are you willing to listen to yourself as well, and to be honest with yourself, and to actually ask yourself questions, and to be empathic with your emotions? Are you willing to actually build yourself up? And are you also willing to hold yourself accountable, which is kind of what step 4 is in a lot of ways? And are you also willing to disarm yourself, to be willing to listen and agree with yourself when maybe other people don't? So these again, I want to tell you that these skills, these steps, these principles, they mean everything to me. They have allowed me to harness the passion that's in me and the bluntness that I sometimes have, but still to be able to love people first and to care about them. I'm nowhere near perfect in it, and nor are you, but the cool part is it's a win-win. Is when you try these, you win, even when you fail, because the people will know that you're trying. If you have any questions about any of these, you can always email me. You can always get in touch with me. You can come in for a session and even harness them better. You can also practice with someone that you feel safe with. If, for example, the disarming technique with parents, I challenge all of my parents to take statements that their children say to them that are very difficult for them to kind of agree with, and I have their other spouse in a room when they're by themselves say them to them. I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. You drive me nuts. Why do you always try to control me? I can't stand that you do this. And practice listening. Practice how you would respond to them, because in that moment, as you all know, if you're not prepared, these kinds of conversations get away from you very quickly, and they lead to emotional disconnection, which is not what we want. And so practice, and take the scenarios in your life right now and see if you can apply them on paper and apply them again with somebody else in a role play, and then go do it and go practice. Thank you.